Laurie Cohn and her daughter Jackie were never really close.
I don't think they got along very well.
But then Jack Cohn, Laurie's husband and Jackie's father, was murdered in a home invasion.
He's all bloody on the floor.
And he was beaten to death.
It was just overkill. Just brutal.
At first, the tragedy brought the two women together.
They both appeared to be distraught and surprised.
But then...
they started turning on each other.
And when the finger-pointing stopped, it would be up to the police to untangle the secrets revealed and find the true killer.
People will do crazy stuff to get whatever they're addicted to.
San Bernardino, California, April 2nd, 2012. It was a little after 4 o'clock in the morning when 23-year-old Jackie Cohn called 911, worried about the safety of her father, 64-year-old Jack Cohn. Jackie and her mother had just come home and discovered a break-in.
The door's wide open, his truck's gone, and I'm outside because I don't know if he's here or not, but it looks like they've been robbed.
While Jackie dialed 911, her mother, 47-year-old Laurie Cohn, had stepped inside. But she quickly came back out and took the phone from her daughter.
Everything's ransacked, turned upside down, and I can't find my husband.
Then, still on the phone with the dispatcher, Laurie walked back into the house, going deeper into the back bedroom, searching for her husband.
Jack,
what kind of car does your husband drive?
Laurie never answered the question. In one of the back rooms, she had finally found Jack.
God, he's all bloody on the floor.
He's there now?
He's on the floor, all bloody.
Okay, stay on the phone with me. I'm sending the police and paramedics right now.
But when the police and paramedics arrived, there was nothing they could do for Jack.
He's been beaten to death in a very brutal fashion. He had been bound with wire and duct tape.
There was blood splatter everywhere.
Why Jack would be the target of a violent home invasion robbery wasn't hard to guess.
Jack was a licensed gun dealer. He had hundreds of guns.
But other than that, the police had little to go on. When questioned at the scene, Laurie told the police that she and Jackie had been away that evening, enjoying a girls' night out.
Laurie and Jackie Cohn were at a casino gambling late into the night together.
And then she had come home to find Jack brutally murdered.
She found him dead on the floor of his bedroom.
And by the time friends and neighbors heard the news and began gathering outside the house, Laurie had lost all composure.
Laurie was on the front lawn crying.
She was just a sobbing mess. I remember just tears running down her face, and they were trying to interview her, and she was just inconsolable.
And it wasn't hard to see why, based on what Laurie told the police about her relationship with her dead husband.
She said that he was her best friend.
Born in 1965, California native Laurie Jean Gibson wasn't normally the type to break down in tears.
She had sort of an imposing presence, a commanding presence.
She's a big, tough-looking, confident woman. I would say she was fearless.
She'd had to be. Laurie grew up poor, and she'd started working at 15. Out on her own since she graduated high school, Laurie had hit rock bottom when she met Jack in 1984.
She had no place to go, no money, no nothing.
Temporarily homeless, the 19-year-old was drifting around San Bernardino doing odd jobs to survive when an acquaintance did her a favor and took her in.
He hired Laurie to do some work on their home. She was painting and doing other things.
While living there, Laurie also met her friend's brother, Jack Cohn. 17 years older than Laurie, Chicago native and Army veteran Jack Cohn ran a modestly successful San Bernardino TV repair business.
Jack Cohn had been there a long time. His business was well known. A lot of people had had their TVs repaired by him.
He also had a license to buy and sell guns.
He was a firearms dealer and apparently quite good at it. He had a thriving business.
He was well known in the community.
And he was generally well liked.
He was funny and sweet and generous, and he liked a good meal. He liked a good laugh.
If he was a friend of yours, he'd give you the shirt off his back. Anything that he had was yours.
Both of them loved her. They doted on her.
Especially Jack.
Jack loved the ground that girl walked on.
She was a daddy's girl.
Laurie continued to lend a hand around the shop while raising their daughter. Then, once Jackie started school, she took a more active role, helping Jack branch out into a new business, satellite TV.
She was running several crews of installers, putting satellite dishes on houses.
He was one of the biggest direct TV guys, I think, out west. And he won a lot of awards.
Although Laurie deserved a lot of the credit, now entering her 30s, she was truly coming into her own as an equal partner in the business.
She described herself as a hard-charging businesswoman.
And in the early 2000s, Laurie was finally a married woman, too.
They went up to Victorville to that little chapel and got married.
It was a quiet ceremony, much like their relationship. Already together for more than a decade, Laurie and Jack's marriage seemed to work for them, even if they weren't the most affectionate couple.
Never in all the years that I knew them did I ever hear them say, "I love you." They never kissed each other. Goodbye, hello.
Newly married and now in his 50s, Jack was already looking forward to retirement.
He loved to play golf. He'd play golf 7 days a week if he could.
Laurie, only in her mid-30s when the couple married, liked a little more excitement.
She was fun. She liked to go out. She liked to drink.
She also liked to gamble, hitting the tables at one of San Bernardino's local casinos.
She would go with friends.
We always gambled for a couple of 3 hours.
For the most part, Jack was more than happy to give Laurie a little time alone with her girlfriends.
Jack used to take us out for dinner before we went.
But even as Laurie and Jack settled into what appeared to be a comfortable routine, trouble arose.
They'd had some difficulties with their daughter.
Daddy's little girl had become quite a handful as a teenager.
She had problems in school. She had problems with everything.
And she especially had problems with her mother.
Jackie's relationship with her mother sounded really rocky. I don't think they got along very well.
She was better at putting her foot down than Jack was.
Laurie wanted to set more rules.
Jack, on the other hand, indulged his daughter, same as always, causing some friction with his wife.
Jack just spoiled Jackie and gave her everything she wanted.
Anytime that she wanted money, she went to Dad.
He couldn't say no.
However, by the time Jackie finished high school, there was no denying that she was headed for trouble. Within the next few years, she'd had several children and a failed marriage, and eventually, she had turned to drugs.
She was involved in methamphetamine, using it. There were some allegations that she had been selling methamphetamine.
Whether she was dealing or not, Jackie definitely stole to support her habit, a fact that led to the 23-year-old's arrest in early 2012.
Jackie was in jail for a period of time.
Jack was devastated by his daughter's arrest.
Laurie Cohn described Jack Cohn trying to protect her from the consequences of her behavior.
When she was released in late March, her doting father rushed to welcome her back.
When she came out of the jail, Jack was there ready to help her out.
He always took care of her without any hesitation.
And in a surprising reversal, Laurie appeared happy to have her daughter back, too. On the night of April 1st, Laurie decided to put their past differences behind them and invited her daughter out for the evening.
She and Jackie had gone out gambling.
But early that morning, as they drove home at 4 a.m., a shocking discovery was about to put a serious damper on their attempt at reconciliation. Coming up, Laurie swears vengeance on Jack's killer.
I swear as God is my witness, I will see you rot in hell.
But what if that somebody is her own daughter?
She said if Jackie did the crime, she has to do the time.
On April 2nd, 2012, Laurie Cohn discovered her 64-year-old husband, Jack Cohn, beaten to death in their San Bernardino, California home.
Jack had been beaten badly. He had blood all over his face, all over his body.
It was overkill. Just brutal.
But was the brutal murder the reason for the break-in? Or was Jack simply collateral damage? When the police arrived on the scene, it looked as if Jack was the victim of a home invasion.
Their first impression was that somebody broke into this house and encountered this guy trying to rob him.
People knew he had a business. It's reasonable to think that he might have cash, and valuables laying around.
Not only were there TVs and electronics related to his TV repair and satellite business, the fact that Jack was also a licensed gun dealer made him a doubly attractive target.
There's a significant gang problem in San Bernardino County and in that surrounding area. So I'm sure they thought about gangs who would want to get his weapons.
Jack had thought long and hard about it too, storing his weapons in a special locked room behind a security door.
He was really protective about his guns.
He had video cameras all around the house, and he had video cameras inside the house.
It was like a fortress. There was never a way for me to get in there without somebody from the inside letting me in.
However, on the night of his murder, Jack's elaborate security had done nothing to deter the thieves. His killers had cleaned out his gun room, taken his truck to haul the loot, and stolen the digital video recorder wired into the surveillance cameras.
The DVR was an important piece of information in that it contained video, perhaps the actual killer in the house.
There was one thing the thieves didn't take, however: the contents of the shop's safe.
They never got into the safe. There was $9,000 in there.
It wasn't for lack of trying. It appeared that in an effort to get the combination to the safe, the thieves had taken Jack alive.
It looked like he'd been surprised because he was still in his underwear from sleeping, and he was pulled from the bed on the floor and he was bound.
He had the cords going around his wrists and his ankles and tied to his neck.
And when Jack had refused to give up the combination to the safe, the thief or thieves had apparently resorted to torture.
Things went bad and he was beaten to death.
It appeared to be a stroke of luck that his wife and daughter hadn't suffered a similar fate.
The night of the homicide, Laurie and Jackie Cohn were at a casino gambling late into the night together.
At the scene, Laurie and her daughter both appeared to be devastated by Jack's death.
They both appeared to be distraught and surprised by what they had encountered.
But were all their tears sincere? To the investigators, the fact that the thieves had easily defeated Jack's security suggested an inside job. And it didn't take much police work to identify who had most likely tipped off the killers.
Jackie was a known addict. She had just gotten out of jail, so it wasn't hard to believe that she may have been involved in this robbery.
Had Jackie tipped off some friends, sending them to the house while she and her mother were out? That night, when the police brought mother and daughter down to the station to take their formal statements, Laurie appeared confused and shocked that someone would murder the man who had been her friend and lover for more than 20 years.
Do you have any idea who would hurt him?
No, because he was the nicest guy in the world. He would have gave anybody anything out of that shop if they came to rob him.
She couldn't imagine anybody doing this to Jack. He was a really social guy who would give the shirt off his back to anybody. He didn't have any enemies, so she was shocked that this happened to him.
But she also said some things that suggested she shared the investigators' suspicions about her daughter.
Laurie told the detectives that perhaps they ought to be looking at her daughter Jackie because of her drug use and the types of people that she associated with.
She just got out of jail. She got sentenced to felony probation.
But then, when the police asked Laurie point blank whether she thought Jackie was involved, Laurie appeared to have second thoughts.
Laurie tells police that her daughter had nothing to do with the murder.
She was the daddy's girl anyway.
Laurie's claim may have been true. Jackie may not have known anything about her father's murder. But did that rule out the robbery?
Jackie could have simply told some of her addict friends, hey, my dad has some guns, he has some TVs, here's how you get around the security, never thinking that her dad might end up dead.
And even if Jackie had been in on the crime, there was still one problem. She had a pretty good alibi.
They had been at the casino all night.
We were there until 4 this morning, 3:45. We were just playing casino and got in the car, stopped at Carl's Jr., and went home.
At least that's what Laurie said. But was there something she wasn't telling the investigators? At the end of the interview, the investigators decided to try and rule out the possibility that Laurie could be covering for her daughter.
Would you be willing to take a polygraph test?
Laurie agreed. In fact, when the investigators stepped out of the room moments later, she vowed to herself that she would see that Jack's killer was brought to justice.
I swear as God is my witness, I will see you rot in hell.
She was going to seek revenge and make sure that somebody paid for this.
But despite Laurie's assurances, the police still suspected that someone just might be Jackie. Once her mother's interview was over and the investigators went to get Jackie for her statement, they discovered that the 23-year-old was far less distraught than she had been at the crime scene.
She had fallen asleep at the station.
It was a telling change for the investigators, especially in light of what they knew about Jackie's drug addiction.
Jackie could have been coming down from methamphetamine. It's very typical to be up for extended periods of time, days at a time, and then they crash, and no matter what the circumstances are around them, they just crash and go to sleep.
Whatever the reason, the resulting interview was disappointing.
She really could not provide much information.
I just want to get this out. I want to go.
No, literally, trust me.
And when Jackie left the station that morning with her mother, her apparent lack of concern over finding her father's killer did little to deter the investigators' suspicion.
Between her behavior and her background, she really looked like a strong suspect.
Of course, she did have an alibi. And since she and her mother had supposedly spent the night in a casino, it would be easy to confirm.
And one of the good things about a casino is they have the best video equipment in the world.
When the investigators pulled the video, it confirmed that Laurie and Jackie had both spent the evening at the casino.
When the Coens said they were at the casino at a certain time, the police very quickly and easily verified that information.
There was never any dispute about it.
But it wouldn't be long before the investigators were wondering if that was all part of the plan. Coming up, Jackie reveals a shocking secret about her mother.
I think she knew what right thing to do at that time was.
And the police close in on another suspect.
A guy went running out the back door.
By the afternoon of April 3rd, 2012, it had been more than 24 hours since 64-year-old Jack Cohn was found bludgeoned to death in his San Bernardino, California home.
He was bound with wires. He had tape wrapped around him. He was just bloody and brutally murdered.
The police believed his murder was the result of a home invasion robbery.
They find the house ransacked. Weapons, rifles have been taken.
And they wondered whether Jack's 23-year-old daughter, Jackie, had been in on the crime.
Jackie spent some time in jail, and it was one of the reasons why they had some suspicion about her.
However, there were a couple of things that gave the investigators pause. The first was the fact that Jackie appeared to have a solid alibi. When the murder occurred, she had been at a local casino with her mother, 47-year-old Laurie Cohn.
Police were able to confirm this by surveillance video of Laurie and Jackie at the casino.
And the second came that afternoon, when Laurie arrived to take a polygraph test. According to the results, when the police started asking Laurie questions about Jack's murder, she started lying.
The polygraph examiner told the detectives that they felt that Laurie was being deceptive.
But why would Laurie lie? Was she simply covering for her daughter? Or Was there more to it? For the moment, the investigators weren't sure, because when they told Laurie the results of the polygraph and began to press her for answers, she abruptly ended the interview.
She bolted, she ran out of the room.
Kind of odd behavior for a woman who says she had nothing to do with the crime.
Did Laurie's reaction mean she was somehow involved in Jack's murder? A possible answer came the next day when the investigators received an urgent call from a police detective in the neighboring city of Rialto.
He had a person who wanted to talk to the detectives about the Jack Cohn murder case.
And when the investigators arrived at the Rialto Police Department,
lo and behold, they found Jackie Cohn there. And Jackie was crying.
I think she knew what the right thing to do at that time was, and that was just to come clean.
Once in the interrogation room, the story Jackie started telling them was, in some ways, exactly what the investigators were expecting: a tale of addiction.
She had a drug problem.
However, according to Jackie, she wasn't the only addict in the family. She told the police that her mother, Laurie, had a serious gambling problem.
She was addicted to gambling in the worst way.
She definitely lived for that gambling high.
Jackie told the investigators that over the last several years, Laurie's habit of gambling for fun had grown into a full-fledged addiction.
It got to the point where she was gambling almost every day.
Jackie claimed that her mother was losing almost every day, too.
She would lose thousands of dollars at a time.
Sometimes she won big, and I guess that was enough, like other gamblers who have that sort of addiction, to keep her going back and back.
And as Laurie's addiction deepened, Jackie said that her mother resorted to desperate measures to feed her habit.
Laurie would very often take money out of the cash register to go to the casino.
She started taking his stuff and started pawning it and hawking it so she could get money to gamble.
As shocking as that was, Jackie had yet another revelation about her mother. She claimed that by 2011, her mother's gambling addiction had led to another addiction: methamphetamines.
She ended up doing meth with her daughter and her daughter's friends.
Although according to Jackie, her mother didn't take meth to get high.
She took the meth so that she'd be wired and she'd spend the whole night and into the early morning hours at the casinos.
People will do crazy stuff to get whatever they're addicted to.
Jackie told the police that her father knew all about Laurie's gambling.
On more than one occasion, they fought over it.
Jackie claimed that the fights had grown more heated as her mother's losses mounted.
He worked too hard for his money just to give it away.
And she said that in early 2012, some 4 months before his murder, her father had finally had enough.
Jack said, "Get out." Laurie left the house, and Jack changed the locks on the house.
She had no access to money or even her personal property that was in the house.
According to Jackie, after Jack kicked her mother out, Laurie fell in with a rough crowd: the dealers and addicts who had kept Laurie and her daughter supplied with drugs.
All of the people involved in the circle of friends with Laurie Cohn and her daughter Jackie Cohn were really all known to be methamphetamine users.
She got involved with some pretty raunchy people.
Jackie claimed that her mother had spent the next few months essentially homeless, living the life of a meth addict.
She kind of just stayed at people's homes kind of randomly.
And then, once Jackie got out of jail, Laurie reconnected with her daughter, including their night out on the evening of Jack's murder.
Jackie Cohn was living at the house, and Laurie had come over and picked her up. They went to the casino.
If your mom and dad are having so much trouble that they're talking about separation, divorce, why would you go gambling with your mom?
According to Jackie, they were on their way home from the casino when her mother's phone rang.
Jackie has her mother's phone in her hand, and she sees a telephone call coming in, and she looks at the caller ID, and the name on the phone is Shauna Bayless.
Jackie told the investigators that Shauna was a friend of her mother's, one of the people she had crashed with after Jack threw her out.
Shauna's house was somewhat of a haven to a lot of methamphetamine users, a lot of gang members, and a lot of people who'd been in trouble with the law.
Even more interesting for the investigators, Jackie said that Shauna had called her mother with an urgent question about keys. Jack's keys, she was pretty sure.
He had a key ring that my grammar school janitor would be proud of. He had hundreds of keys.
Although according to Jackie, Laurie and Shauna's hushed conversation centered on one key in particular.
Laurie turned away and talked to Shauna and said, "It's the green one."
And that was the key for the gate.
If what Jackie was telling the police was true, she had overheard Laurie telling Jack's killer how to get into the house. On April 4th, 2012, a little more than 48 hours after she'd called 911 and reported that Jack was dead, the police placed Laurie Cohn under arrest.
She was originally charged with murder and conspiracy to commit murder.
That same day, the police knocked on Shauna Bayless's door. But that's when the story took a strange new twist. Even as the investigators handcuffed Shauna, an unidentified man bolted out of the back of her house.
A guy went running out the back door and jumped into the swimming pool.
Once the police fished him out of the pool, they identified the man as a career criminal named Gary Gallion.
He was an ex-con and really just a bad guy.
In fact, he was wanted for violating parole.
He had not been checking in with his parole officers.
But was that outstanding warrant the only reason he ran when the police showed up at Shauna's door?
At this point, police don't really know if he had anything to do with Jack's murder or if he just happened to be at Shauna's house.
Once in custody, Gary refused to talk, but not Shauna.
She dropped all the names and provided quite a bit of information.
And she started off with a confession.
She openly admitted her involvement.
Up to a point, that is. Shauna stopped short of confessing to murder.
It was supposed to go down like a robbery.
Shauna said that Laurie had been furious and broke once Jack kicked her out of the house. According to Shauna, Gary Gallion came into the picture once Laurie started talking about breaking in and robbing Jack.
Shauna was his friend.
And at some point, she introduces the two of them.
And once she had made the introduction, Gary and Laurie had begun plotting the robbery.
She told him how to get in there.
Shauna also claimed that Laurie had told Gary how to defeat Jack's security cameras.
Laurie told everybody that the first thing you do when you get into that room is get the DVR.
According to Shauna, the three conspirators swung into action on the evening of April 1st. Laurie headed off to the casino to establish an alibi.
She's there with her daughter, supposedly having a festive grand time.
And Shauna drove Gary to Jack's shop.
Did he go armed? I don't know. I have no idea. Do you know what I dropped him off.
Shauna said that Gary was supposed to steal Jack's truck for his getaway. But the plan hit a snag.
So he calls Shauna and says, "Hey, the gate's locked."
Shauna said that she had called Laurie, asking which of Jack's many keys would open the gate.
She tells me the green key, and her daughter's in the car when this conversation goes on. You can ask her daughter.
Shauna claimed that not long after, Gary had turned up at her house with a truckload of loot.
He had a television set in the truck. He had rifles in the pickup truck.
And it was only then, according to Shauna, that Gary told her that Jack had been murdered.
He ended up dying, and it was not cool. It wasn't cool.
Coming up, at trial, the prosecutors produced stunning new evidence.
She offered several $1,000s.
And Laurie turns on her daughter.
She said that Jackie begged her to go out to the casino.
On February 26, 2013, both Laurie Cohn and Gary Gallion stood trial at the San Bernardino County Courthouse.
Laurie and Gary were tried together. It was one prosecutor and two defense attorneys, and it was just one jury panel.
They were both charged with the April 2012 murder of Laurie's husband, Jack Cohn.
The prosecution believed that it was simply anger at Jack for kicking her out, but also that she had a financial motive.
The third member of the conspiracy, Shauna Bayless, had already confessed to helping Laurie recruit Gary Gallion.
Shauna's kind of the crux of all this.
However, she wasn't on trial, but she would appear in court as the star witness for the prosecution.
Shauna decides to take a plea bargain.
There were no such deals for Laurie and Gary. Both the accused mastermind and the alleged assassin had spent the past 9 months in jail.
Very few people bail out on a murder charge. It's usually $1 million bail, sometimes more.
And when Laurie sat down in court that morning, her old friends and neighbors hardly recognized her.
She had lost a lot of weight since she got arrested, probably, I would say, a good 100 pounds.
But in their opening statement, the prosecutors urged the jury to see Laurie for what she was, a gambling addict solely motivated by greed.
She wanted to feed the gambling addiction.
Then, the prosecutors called Laurie's daughter Jackie to the stand to explain how her mother's gambling had driven a wedge between her parents.
She talked about how there was this gambling addiction and there was this debt.
Jackie also testified about how shortly before his death, her father had kicked Laurie out of the house.
Jack was tired of her gambling and spending money and taking money to go to the casino and was trying to stop her.
According to the prosecution's theory, that's when Laurie hatched the plot that led to her husband's death.
That is what lit the fuse, so to speak.
On the second day of testimony, Shauna Bayless took the stand and described how she and Laurie had recruited Gary into what Shauna believed was simply a plot to rob Laurie's husband.
She talks about how Gary Gallion was involved. She talks about the plot to break in and steal this property, what Laurie Cohn had promised Gary Gallion.
There was cash in the safe and that there were an abundance of guns that could be sold for cash.
I'm sure Gary Gallion was motivated simply by age-old greed.
She also described how on the night of the murder, she had dropped Gary off outside the Cohn's house while Laurie was at the casino parading in front of the security cameras.
She's thinking, I've got the perfect alibi at the time that my husband's business is being invaded and he's being beaten to death. Why, here I am at the casino, and here's the camera to prove it.
Unfortunately, Laurie wasn't the only one who had been caught on camera.
Jack had installed several surveillance cameras around the property and inside the house.
According to Shauna, Laurie had tipped Gary off about the cameras and given him instructions to take the digital video recorder that they were wired into.
Gary takes the video recorder from inside the strong room.
He had hidden it and told Shauna where, a fact that she had later passed on to the police.
We found it in a trash can near a liquor store in San Bernardino.
And it was completely intact. There had been no attempt to try to destroy it.
At the end of Shauna's testimony, the prosecutors played the DVR footage for the jury.
And that was huge because there was video of somebody breaking into the gunroom inside Jack's house. And it was clear as day.
And since Jack's killer planned on taking the DVR, he wasn't all that careful about hiding his face.
At one point, Gary Gallion could be seen looking directly up at the camera with his entire full-face view.
The cameras didn't record Jack's murder, nor could they prove that Laurie intended for Gary to kill her husband. But according to the prosecutors, they had a witness who did. His name was Charles Duke, and he had come forward a few days after Jack's death.
He had heard about Jack Cohn's murder and that he wanted to make sure that nobody tried to implicate him.
And the reason that he was worried someone might implicate him ended up implicating Laurie.
Laurie Cohn had contacted him a few months earlier, asking him if he would kill her husband.
She offered several $1,000s.
That changed it from a robbery gone awry to this murder-for-hire plot.
In fact, according to the prosecution, Duke wasn't the only person Laurie tried to hire. just the first one to come forward.
She was reckless about her intent in doing away with her husband. She was basically cavalier about it.
And once Charles Duke finished testifying, several of the other men Laurie allegedly tried to hire took the stand too.
They had certainly overwhelming evidence.
Overwhelming or not, when it was the defense's turn, Gary Gallion took the stand and tried to shrug off the fact that the prosecutors apparently had him on video.
Gary said that that wasn't him.
I thought that was laughable.
So did the prosecutor.
He asks Gallion, "Sure looks like you." Gallion said, "Well, a lot of people look like me."
Besides, according to Gary, the man in the video couldn't be him.
Mr. Gallion testified that at the time of this murder, he was in fact breaking into hotel rooms in southern San Bernardino and stealing television sets.
And that's why he was in possession of televisions.
Gary also denied conspiring with Laurie to kill her husband. In fact, he denied even knowing Laurie.
The defense told jurors that Gary and Laurie had never met, that the first time they saw each other was during their arraignment.
True or not, Gary and the rest of the court would get another good look at Laurie on March 5th, when the murder's alleged mastermind took the stand in her own defense.
She was very sure of herself.
Although she wasn't above getting emotional.
She broke down a couple of times. When they put up pictures of Jack Cohn showing him right after the murder when he was bound and tied and beaten, she wouldn't look at the pictures. She looked away, and she cried when she talked about him.
And she was adamant that she had nothing to do with Jack's death, despite their differences.
She testified that she still loved him and things along those lines.
Tried to portray herself as this loyal, loving mother and wife.
But if that were true, why would Shauna Bayless and the other witnesses claim that Laurie had plotted to rob and murder her husband? According to Laurie, it was simple. She had been framed.
She said that she never had those conversations with people.
Instead, Laurie claimed that the real mastermind behind the murder and the frame-up was her daughter, Jackie.
It was crazy. Why would Daddy's little girl, the daughter, the one he gave everything to, want him dead?
It was shocking, perhaps, but according to Laurie, the fact that Jack gave her everything was precisely why his daughter wanted him dead.
Jackie was the only heir. They had put the house into Jackie's name prior to Jack's death, so she inherited the house. He ended up getting basically everything.
The way Laurie told it, that was why Jackie arranged her father's murder.
She said that Jackie begged her to go out the night that they went to the casino, that it was Jackie's idea to just have this evening at the casino together.
And according to Laurie, that was also why she had arranged for her mother to take the fall.
She did believe that Jackie put people up to saying things implicating Laurie.
I don't know if it's that surprising that they started turning on each other, because you have a mother and daughter who never really were that close.
Coming up, will the jury believe Laurie's story?
I really think that her daughter was in on it.
Or will it send her away?
She needs to pay for what she's done.
On March 12, 2013, at the San Bernardino County Courthouse, the jury announced that it had reached a verdict in the murder trial of Laurie Cohn and Gary Gallion. According to the prosecution, Laurie had hired Gary to rob and murder her husband, Jack Cohn, in order to finance her gambling addiction.
It sounded like Laurie wanted her husband dead, and she wanted his money and his possessions.
Although at trial, Laurie claimed that it sounded like that for a reason. She had been framed by the crime's true mastermind, her daughter, Jackie.
Jackie was no saint, but it's hard to believe that a mother would throw her only child under the bus just so she wouldn't have to go to prison.
Would the jury believe her? Considering that Jackie was a drug addict who'd been released from jail just days before the murder, even family friends had a hard time dismissing the possibility that she might be involved.
I really think that her daughter was in on it.
I think she knew a lot more than what everybody says.
But when the verdict was read, it was clear that the jurors didn't share those doubts. They found both Laurie and Gary guilty of murder.
I remember sitting with the family members, and we all were holding hands, and we squeezed each other, and we said, yes!
At the defense table, Laurie showed no such emotion.
The only tell sign was that her leg rapidly shook as the verdict was being read.
However, despite her impassive poker face, the compulsive gambler had just lost the biggest bet in her life. She and Gary Gallion were both given the maximum sentence for their involvement in the murder.
She was given a sentence of life without possibility of parole.
She will never get out of prison, and I hope not, because she needs to pay for what she's done.
How far would you be willing to go to hide your darkest secret for Kristen Rossum? She'd be willing to go pretty far. See, Kristen was a toxicologist from California who dedicated her life and her career to helping investigators solve crimes and keeping people like you and me safe from toxic chemicals. But Kristen also had a few dark secrets that she was desperate to keep hid, and it was November of 2000 when a phone call rang through to 911. Dispatchers, it was Kristen, and she was frantic. She just found her husband lying on the floor of their home clutching their wedding photo, and he wasn't breathing. Kristen believed he had taken his own life. The 911 operator walked Kristen through performing CPR, but it was no use by the time police and detectives had arrived. Her husband had already lost his life, but when investigators began collecting evidence from the scene of the crime, well, things just weren't adding up. It didn't take long before they realized this man didn't take his own life, he had his life. Music taken. Kristen Rossum was born in Memphis, Tennessee, but she didn't spend too much time here as a child. Instead, she grew up in Claremont, California, which is about 30 miles away from Los Angeles. Compared to Los Angeles, Claremont is a pretty solid place to live, and crime is relatively low in the area. All things considered, it's a perfectly reasonable place to raise a family, and that's exactly what the Rossum did. Kristen was raised alongside her two younger brothers, with her father being a college professor, while her mother worked at AUA Pacific University. For the longest time, everything seemed to be going well for the family. From outward appearances, they were your average happy American family, living the dream, so to speak. But as Kristen reached her teenage years, well, cracks began to show, and it was clear that Kristen was struggling. In 1991, Kristen's father was offered a job as president of the Hampton-Sydney College. This was a pretty major job offer, but there was only one problem. It was on the complete opposite side of the country, in Virginia. Knowing that he couldn't pass up such an amazing opportunity, Kristen's dad accepted the offer, and without hesitation, the entire family uprooted and moved to Virginia. Kristen wasn't too happy about the move. Once they had arrived, her parents enrolled seemed to make a bad situation worse. No sooner than Kristen began attending school here, she started getting into trouble. It started with her drinking alcohol while far too young, then escalated her smoking cigarettes again while she was far too young to do so legally. But again, this escalated. She then started smoking things that were highly illegal at this point in history. Remember, this is around 1991 to 1992 at this point, and it was becoming painfully obvious Kristen was not having a good time at her new school, but still things would escalate from here. Starting at some point in 1992, Kristen's behavior got even worse, and she began experimenting with certain chemicals that are known for being life-destroying, allocation-consuming, and downright dangerous. We're talking Walter White level stuff. This took place when Kristen was about 16 years old. It only took a few uses for Kristen to be nearly ruining her life by controlling her every move. By 1990, for she decided she'd had enough of the Virginia lifestyle, and she opted to move back home to California, enrolling in the University of Redlands part-time, and even having accommodations on campus. At this point, Kristen was 18 years old now, legally an adult and free woman. Although she still suffered from the shackles of her addiction, we don't know for sure how much time Kristen spent in college here, but we do know that before too long her addiction grew considerably worse, and she had to leave school as a result, with some sources suggesting she was likely kicked out due to her addiction, but this hasn't been confirmed 100%. It was around this time that Kristen met a man who completely blew her away, Greg DeVillers. Now some people insist on pronouncing Greg's name as Devier, and others simply say it as DeVillers, but we'll just call him Greg to keep it simple. After leaving college, Kristen decided to take some time off and scheduled a vacation to Tijuana, Mexico. While here she met Greg, an upstanding guy who could clearly see that Kristen was struggling. The story goes that Greg noticed Kristen from a distance after she had dropped her jacket. He swooped in and picked it up for her, and the two hit it off instantly. Greg could see that in his eyes Kristen was a good person who's simply been dealt a bad hand. He knew from the moment they met that she'd been struggling, and after the two been hanging out for a while. After this, he learned of her addiction troubles. He wanted to do whatever he could to help Kristen overcome this, and if you could believe it, he actually succeeded. The two had met in December of 1994, and over the course of a few short years, with Greg's love and support, Kristen not only managed to overcome her addiction, but she also managed to re-enroll in college, this time at San Diego State University, and even graduated with honors. Needless to say, after helping her turn her life around in such a profound way and being there for her in every step of her journey, Kristen fell deeply in love with Greg, and it was clear he felt the same way. Thus, after dating for nearly 5 years, the two got married in June of 1999, but their joy would be short-lived because just a few months later, tragedy would strike. Kristen would admit to several of her friends that prior to marrying Greg, she'd started having second thoughts. She never really explained why she felt this way, but she wrote off these feelings as pre-wedding jitters and went through with the wedding anyway. But as time ticked by, it became more and more clear these thoughts were not going away. Kristen felt that she'd made a mistake. Now Kristen admits that for the first 6 months of their marriage, the two were perfectly happy, but as more and more time passed by, feelings began to fade, and Kristen began to regret her decision to marry Greg rather than reach out for help or seek professional guidance to help resolve this. Kristen had been hired as a toxicologist for the San Diego Medical Examiner Office. Her new job began to consume more and more of her time, and Greg began to grow concerned. He knew his wife had a very important job, but as time passed by, she was spending more and more time at work and less time at home, and this trend was only getting worse as time went on. But it became clear pretty quickly that Kristen wasn't just working long hours. No, there was much more to the story than that. By June of 2000, Greg and Kristen had been married for less than a year when she began an affair with her boss, Michael Robertson, the head of the toxicology lab. Kristen says that soon after the affair began, she came clean with Greg and let him know exactly what was going on. But for the life of me, I can't figure out why she did this, because she didn't even break up with Michael, nor did she end things with Greg. She continued seeing Michael behind Greg's back for months, so why bother telling him if you're not going to end one of the two relationships, whatever her reasoning was? Kristen says that Greg was naturally devastated. She said he spent a period of about 2 days just lying in bed, speaking to no one. After the fog had cleared, Greg mustered up the courage to call Michael at home, confronting him about the affair and demanding that the two end their relationship immediately. Michael refused. The affair would continue for several more months, and by October of that year, not only had Kristen effectively ruined their marriage, but she also threw away 5 years of recovery, falling back into the deadly grasp of addiction harder than she ever had before. This brings us to November of 2000. After the affair had gone on for about 4 or 5 months, Greg decided enough was enough. Once he learned that Kristen had fallen back into her addiction, he gave her an ultimatum: quit your job and stay home, or I'll inform the medical examiner's office about both your affair and your addiction. Kristen was blindsided. She didn't know what to do. In some way, it seems as though she still may have loved Greg. I mean, she had to if she refused to leave him after all this, but also she was clearly swept away by Michael, and she couldn't stand the thought of not seeing him anymore. To top this off, she certainly didn't want to leave her job as a toxicologist. So what was she to do? Well, in November of 2000, Kristen's future became ever more clear, and many of her problems, well, they vanished. That's because at 9:15 p.m. on November 6, Kristen called 911. She'd found Greg passed out on the floor. Music, unresponsive. Kristen phoned 911 that evening and announced to the operator that her husband had taken his own life. The operator walked Kristen through performing CPR, but it didn't do any good. Greg was already gone by. The time paramedics arrived, he was declared deceased at the scene. By this point, Kristen and Greg had been married for only about 17 months, putting a sudden and tragic end to an incredibly short marriage that for Greg was the love he'd been waiting his whole life for. When police questioned Kristen about what had taken place that evening, she explained that Greg had been acting very groggy and sluggish all day. He'd also been unusually nervous in the days leading up to this. She thought that he'd just been dealing with the effects of some cold medicine he'd taken combined with the stress of their failing marriage, but this clearly wasn't the case. Kristen says that she decided to take a bath that night. When she emerged from the bath, she found Greg on the floor of his bedroom covered in rose petals, clinging to a photo from the couple's wedding day. Nearby, investigators found crumpled up pages of Kristen's diary, but it's not clear what these pages had written on them or why Greg would have been in possession of them. Investigators immediately made the comment, though, that the crime scene was just like a scene from the film American Beauty, but at this point they had no reason to suspect that anything was amiss. Now, Kristen had initially told detectives that Greg was completely sober that evening, but later on she explained that he'd taken cough medicine. Then she suggested to a nurse at the hospital that she believed he may have taken oxycodone, though we don't know where he would have gotten this or why he would have taken it. She then suggested to this nurse that he may have actually overdosed on oxycodone. When police continued speaking with Kristen over the coming hours, she finally revealed she believed Greg was upset about their failing marriage, and this may have driven him to take his own life by mixing cough medicine and oxycodone. But this was purely a guess. She then took things a step further and said that the rose petals that were found around his body were from a set of roses Greg purchased for her birthday a little over a week prior. She said she believed he used these petals from one of the roses to represent their failing marriage. When Greg's family learned of his passing, well, that's when things took a completely different direction. Greg's family simply couldn't imagine that he would take his own life. Yes, his marriage was over, but they didn't believe he was the kind of person who would throw his life away because his wife had been unfaithful. Greg's family loudly voiced their concern to the investigative team, and before long they weren't the only ones who were suspicious. Just 2 days after Greg lost his life, another call came into the local police station. This time it was from one of Kristen's co-workers, Russ Lowe. Russ had learned of the affair that Kristen had been having with their boss, Michael, and he believed there is much more to the story than Kristen was letting on. For detectives, this was all the information they needed to alter the course of their investigation, and that's when police started to look much more closely at the relationship between Michael and Kristen. According to Russ, several of the workers at the lab knew about Kristen's affair with Michael. As it would turn out, Michael was married as well, but as far as I can tell, his wife was blissfully unaware of his affair with Kristen. Many of the employees at the lab were concerned that Kristen would be getting preferential treatment, but there wasn't much they could do about the situation without putting their own careers on the line by speaking out. About a month passed by after Greg lost his life, and once police came public with the information about the affair and Kristen's addiction, both Michael and Kristen were fired from the San Diego Medical Examiner office. Effective immediately, Kristen was fired for concealing her addiction, and Michael was fired for having a relationship with a coworker, but that was only the tip of the iceberg, because just a few weeks after this, the results of Greg's autopsy came back, and it wasn't music pretty. The San Diego Medical Examiner's office had outsourced Greg's autopsy to avoid a conflict of interest, so when the results came back a few weeks later, everyone was taken aback by what had been found after a careful forensic analysis of Greg's body. The medical examiner determined that Greg had passed away from a fentanyl overdose, an incredibly powerful painkiller. When questioned about this, Kristen claimed that Greg had been seriously depressed in the weeks leading up to his passing, suggesting he may have started using this medication as a way to cope. Kristen's father even spoke up and said that he noticed Greg had been drinking heavily and had done so on the night that he lost his life as well. Now, it's safe to assume that both of these statements were likely true. I mean, after all, Greg had just learned about his wife's affair. Something that would lead many people to drink. The depression from the situation is pretty natural as well, but Greg's family were adamant he was not one to cope with his emotions by turning to medication or alcohol. It just wasn't the kind of person he was. As police continued to investigate this Situation they learned about a strange phone call that Kristen had made on the day Greg lost his life. Christ had taken the liberty of calling into Greg's office to let his coworkers know he wouldn't be showing up for work that day because he wasn't feeling well. Why Greg wouldn't have made this call himself, the world may never know. It was also reported by Kristen's coworkers that at around 9 a.m. that morning she was spotted crying in Michael's office. The man that she'd been having the affair with. No one knows why she was doing this, but it was clear something strange was going on. By this point, police were more than just a little bit suspicious of Kristen. They called her in for questioning and confronted her about what they'd found in Greg's toxicology report. They asked Kristen if she had any idea how Greg would have been able to get a hold of fentanyl, but Kristen insisted she had no clue. But here's the thing, being a toxicologist, Kristen would have had virtually limitless access to this chemical, and the implications here are pretty clear. Soon after, police also learned about the ultimatum that Greg had given to Kristen: quit your job or I'll tell the world what you've done. Needless to say, things were not looking good. This information, combined with Kristen's access to the very chemical that claimed her husband's life, led police to officially announce that they believed Kristen was responsible for Greg's demise. On June 25, 2001, Kristen was officially charged, but there's one final twist here that really sends the case into overdrive. After learning that their daughter was going to be sent to trial, Kristen's parents mortgaged their home to raise money for Kristen's bail, which was set at $1.25 million. The only problem was, after all this money was raised for bail, the family had nothing left over to hire Kristen a private attorney, which meant she would be forced to accept a public defender at trial. Kristen told a pretty clear story of what she believed unfolded that day. According to her version of events, Greg been homesick from work that day. She said she noticed him slurring his speech and acting sluggish all morning, so she took it upon herself to call his office and let them know that he'd be staying home that day. She says that she returned home around noon to check up on him and make him some soup, returning to work shortly thereafter, and then returning home once again around 7 p.m. When she got back home that evening, Greg was perfectly fine. He was still sick, but he wasn't any worse off than he was earlier that day. This is when she decided to take a bath and relax for a while, but when she emerged from the bathroom, she found the crime scene: Greg lying on the floor clutching their wedding photo surrounded by rose petals. But the prosecution had a much different version of events to share. According to their investigation, about 90% of Kristen's story simply wasn't true. They believed that Kristen had concocted the crimes against her husband all the way back on April 2nd, days before he lost his life. They believe that November 2nd is the date in which Greg gave Kristen the ultimatum: quit your job or I'll ruin your career and take your boss down with you. In the 4 days leading up to the crime, the prosecution believes that Kristen concocted her plot against Greg, procured the fentanyl that would be used to take his life, and staged the whole thing to look like Greg had taken his own life. To make matters worse, in the hours leading up to Greg's demise, police learned through Kristen's phone records that she'd called Michael repeatedly over and over again, suggesting to some people that Michael may have played a role in masterminding this plan and maybe even helped Kristen access the chemicals used to take Greg's life. Though Michael was never actually convicted of anything. If this weren't bad enough, the prosecutors also claimed that Kristen was fueling her own addiction using chemicals stolen from the lab as well. But here's where things get incredibly interesting. Police found one final piece of evidence against Kristen, one final nail in her coffin, so to speak: the rose petals. Kristen claimed that the rose petals that covered Greg's body came from a rose that he bought for her birthday about a week or so prior. She also claimed that on the day Greg lost his life, she returned home shortly after noon, around 12:45 p.m. to check up on Greg and make him some soup. But would you believe that when police were searching through CCTV footage from that day, they found footage of Kristen at a local grocery store at 12:42 p.m. purchasing a single rose that she would later shred on top of Greg's body? Rather obviously, Kristen was found guilty, but Michael never faced any charges. Kristen was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole and was given a $10,000 fine. On top of this, 4 years later, in 2006, Kristen was fined once again, this time with $0 million in a wrongful death lawsuit that was filed by Greg's family. San Diego County then added additional fines of $1.5 million. Now, these fines were later significantly lowered by a judge, and it appears that Kristen now only owes about $14.5 million in total, but she obviously has no way of ever paying this much money back, and she'll be working it off in prison until her days are done. The only thing that remains unclear in this case is exactly how Kristen managed to poison Greg. She mentioned making him soup for lunch that day, and assuming this aspect of the story is true, it's possible she put the chemical in a soup, but if that were true, then you'd have to wonder how he managed to live up until 900 p.m. That evening. This medication works incredibly quickly, so he likely would have been down in a matter of minutes, not hours. The only other possibility I can think of is that she must have slipped it to him somehow immediately before she got in the bath that evening, then staged the scene of the crime when she got out, but we really don't know. As far as I can tell, Kristen has never explained this aspect of the story because she still insists that she's innocent. Kristen has appealed her sentencing multiple times, but each and every appeal has been denied. As it stands, Kristen is still in prison and will likely remain there for the rest of her life. In the aftermath of this case, Greg's family has done everything they can to try to make sure that Kristen gets what she deserves, and it seems like they're doing a great job at this. If you remember, they won a lawsuit for $100 million against Kristen. According to the family's attorney, they didn't do this because they actually believed they would see that money one day. Instead, they did this because they didn't want Kristen to be able to sell her story for profit. I'm sure you already know this, but companies like Netflix and various others love to swoop in and pay these criminals and monsters for the rights to tell their stories and movie form, or even in a documentary. Greg's family wanted to make sure that if Kristen ever did this, she wouldn't see a single cent of this money, purely because she's in such a tremendous amount of debt. To add to this, Greg's family didn't even plan on suing Kristen for $100 million. They only asked for $50 million, but the jury decided that Kristen's story was worth a minimum of $60 million, so they decided to double the payout to $100 million. I honestly had no idea that a jury had the authority to do such a thing. So if there is any silver lining to this case, Kristen has certainly been dealt with, and Greg's family has ensured that no matter what she does, even if she is released from prison one day, by some miracle, they'll be right there to remind her of the awful torment that she put their family through. Kristen will never ever live this down, and this case is an excellent example of incredible detective work in the judicial system operating at its best. No amount of money or court drama will ever bring Greg back, and the damage Kristen has done to Greg's family, well, it's irreparable. But maybe in some way, knowing that Kristen's life is essentially over, maybe this can bring them some level of peace. Music. Thank you guys for tuning into another episode of True Crime Stories. If you enjoyed this video, check out this other interesting case I covered, and don't forget to subscribe. It's totally free and keeps you up to date with all of my future videos. You can also click that join button below to support the channel and see new videos long before everyone else does. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.